Eccoci qua, buongiorno a tutti, intervista dalla lontana Cina. Adesso Ping ci racconterà, perché ho imparato il nome un attimo fa, quale canale sia questo e quale ponte sia questo che è andato a fotografare. Nello schermo di sopra vedete il mio amico Ping Wang, collega. Hi Ping, good to talk to you and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for inviting me.
Ping è di origine taiwanese, collega a Wushu, abbiamo una storia abbastanza lunga assieme ed è anche membro dell'Accademia Sinica e altre cose in quel di Cina. In particolare diciamo che per svariate ragioni è addentro alle cose taiwanesi. E allora mi sono detto, sentiamo che ne pensa Ping. Adesso passo all'inglese, I'm going to switch to English and the rest is going to be in English so that my friend Ping does not get all confused by my Italian. What do you think?
Okay, sounds good.
So, well, let's get to the crux of the matter. Let's do it in a silly Bayesian probability way. Chances of military conflict between mainland and Taiwan in the next 6 months, in your personal evaluation. Give me a number between 0 and 1.
0%.
1 year?
Still roughly 0%, not until probably, I would say, 2024 or 2025.
Then they go up.
Then it's go up to a possibility of, I would say, 10% roughly.
Okay, then why? Will they ever go to for sure?
Okay, it all depends on the dynamics. But may I clarify 3 things first? Because if you just read media reports, they are all very confusing. Okay, so I just want to clarify 3 very basic facts. Okay.
Absolutely. That's why, in fact, I said, let's see what Ping has to say. Go ahead.
Okay. So PRC was established in 1949.
PRC is
People's Republic of China, or maybe I would just briefly refer to it as mainland China. Taiwan, the official name is Republic of China, was established in 1911. And after the Civil War, when the National Party lost to the Communist Party in 1949, the government moved to Taiwan, and the name has never been changed even by now. Okay, so the 2 countries are indeed the 2 countries. Okay, so this is the fact. Okay, number 1 fact. And the number 2 fact, we also have to recognize each country will need to do their own things. To China, the most important thing is to please the military hardliners. So if you think about the Chinese system, there are usually 6 important members of the executive membership, who will decide on, many crucial things. Or, like the 6 members, you can call executive members of Communist Party. Usually 2 are the military representatives. Whether they are general or not, doesn't matter, but they are the military representatives. Xi Jinping does not belong to that, but Xi Jinping got elected because of the support of the 2 military group. Okay, and hence he even off with his main competitor, and then later put the main competitor in jail, indeed, okay, because of corruption issues. So basically, from the mainland China point of view, to please the military is crucial. Okay, now we should also understand the fact from Taiwan. Okay, by any polls, any trustworthy polls, we know Taiwanese people cannot swallow the less democratic system in China. And hence...
So let me interrupt you for a second.
Yes.
As probably our listener know, the political spectrum in Taiwan is basically bipolar. There is the Kuomintang, that is the old party from Chiang Kai-shek and so on, and the other number I forgot, what's a national
DPP.
DPP, right?
Yeah.
Which is a more recent party because
Democratic Progressive Party.
Progressive.
It is a more recent party. Yes.
Right. Democracy was not there from the start, and which is portrayed and perceived also by myself when I read articles and things as the one that has a component leaning toward independence, full independence. Now, one popular vision is that the population of Taiwan is substantially split in two, maybe 60-40. And 40% was strictly wants to go back to reunite to mainland. Is this true? Because from what you say, it doesn't seem to be true.
No, it's not true. Okay, so to have things in kind of, let me change the terminology a little bit. Let me call the Kuomintang, KMT, the blue party, okay, by color, and the DPP by green party, okay, because like their color is always green. Okay, so when they put up the Taiwan map, it is a green Taiwan. Okay, so blue party right now, yes, in terms of poll, is like about 40%, and the green party is about 60%. That's true. But if you ask people whether you want to be to be merged to China, reunification, okay, then you will see that percentage drop to below 10%. And then if you ask people whether you want to have Taiwan independence, the percentage dropped down to below 20%. Okay, so roughly speaking, we have something like 70 to 75% who want to maintain the status quo. Okay, however, to win election, we all understand this two-party theory, right? To win election, you just want to grab the majority. Okay, everywhere, from mayors to the president and the two legislatures. Then all you need to do is to say, hey, China did us badly. You cannot vote it for blue. And this becomes the #1 most important weapon for the green to win. Okay, later I will talk about more comprehensively, but right now I'm just stating the fact. So the fact in Taiwan is to please the voters, and hence fighting against China is good politically. And China is to please the military hardliners, so Xi Jinping can take the position for longer. And indeed, right now, changing the party rule, he is the party leader forever, basically. Okay, but to stay in power, genuinely, he still need to please the hardliners. Okay, so this is the second fact. This second fact must be understood. Otherwise, we cannot understand why the current media reports are all over the place, very confusing. And the third part, as you and I both know, media reporters and usually they quote a lot from scholars' studies, and sometimes from military veterans, retired generals usually. Okay, but they all have self-interest, and indeed many scholars have gotten money. They have received money from either Republican or Democrats, or from Taiwan or from China. Okay, most of the studies are not really unbiased. Okay, relatively speaking, you can name a short list of scholars who are decent, but for the audience, I just want to name one right now. Right, Bonnie Lin, B-O-N-N-Y, Bonnie Lin. Bonnie Lin used to be at Rand, and she's now moved to DC. Okay, so she served as the director of something called strategic and international relations. She is more unbiased relative to others. Okay, but the other people there. Okay, so you cannot really trust what the military says. Hey, by 2025 there must be a war. Okay, the probability is more than 50%. Okay, you cannot also trust people saying, hey, US will help Taiwan for sure. They will send the military to Taiwan. Well, after Afghanistan, you would better believe this is not going to work. Okay, so basically, most of those claims are, to me,
wait, you're going a bit too fast. You're
yes.
saying, okay, to please, your interpretation of the thing is Xi Jinping is there mostly because, well, no, mostly. Xi Jinping needs the backing of the military to preserve his power, particularly
Yes.
now that is moved full ahead in altering Deng Xiaoping rules and
Yes.
not being willing to cede the power after 2 terms and becoming a permanent leader, thereby replicating Mao,
Yes.
Mao Zedong, almost 50 years later. Okay. This puts it at risk, and the color is using is nationalism and unification and military strength, so that he has the backing of the People's Army.
Yes.
But is the backing of the People's Army a variation of what leftist critics, but even not only leftist critics, even critics like me, or I bet you, read the role of the so-called military complex in the United States, which is we have to keep telling us that we are very much at risk of war to get fantasticillion of dollars for our budget, but we actually have no intention to push to a full war. We just play little wars here and there to justify our existence. In other words, is the nationalistic drive of the People's Army, in your view, and of the public opinion that sustain it, strong enough that they eventually really want reunification with Taiwan, or is it just a useful propaganda machine to become more powerful?
Yep. So this is a perfect question for me to complete the third point, right? So although we have seen all this kind of bias report there, now we have to ask ourselves, will the US want to have the cross-strait war? Whether China really want to initiate the war, okay? Whether Taiwan want to initiate the war, okay? So I'm going backward. Taiwan, for sure, not. Because Taiwan is so small, don't even think about the war. Even with any kind of economic blockage, Taiwan will be in big trouble. The whole economy is going to be in trouble. US, at least under Biden's administration, he has emphasized more than 3 times. US is going to help Taiwan to be strong enough to protect the people there, which basically send a message. US will not send troops there, most likely. Okay, even if there are any smaller number of troops, they are probably like strategic type or like high-tech training type of using the modern weapon. Okay, so I will view that probability as very low either. Okay. How about China? Well, China, they have to hold up tight enough if there are more international issues, so which will be where the probability is coming from. If the US is pressing China for too much, like what Trump has done to collude with Canada to put Huawei in trouble. If China would have done the same thing, China would have done something, like more seriously to Taiwan. Okay. So, but why? So this is my third point. Okay. So the point is really all strategic. So now coming to my assessment, why I say 2024 or beyond? Because 2024, there's a national election to elect for the next president. If Blue Party surprisingly win, the whole thing is over. Okay. Military hardliners in China would not push at all. Okay. So it's more like turning back.
Can you repeat this guess of yours? So your view is if in 2024,
if in 2024 the Blue Party win KMT, then things is over. Just like President Ma
Because what? Because they feel reassured, because they have their friends in Taipei at the power, because of what?
Okay.
So why is
let me go back to the
Kuomintang leadership perceived as, how can I say, acceptable without having a one country, two system by the Chinese leadership? Because they don't say bad things, you know, within Chinese culture, saying bad things about you is very bad. It's almost a physical aggression. What is it?
So basically, you know, this will go back to the history a little bit. There was a 1992 consensus between Communist Party and the KMT. Okay, the consensus basically says one country, two representations. Okay, so basically they agree it's all called China, but one is PRC, one is ROC. So two representations. Each representation rule the particular area. One called mainland China, one called Taiwan. Okay, so they respect this consensus, but two different representations. And to have the status quo maintained until possible future reunification, which will be, hopefully can be done by 2049. So you understand 2049 is a big number because it's 100 years after the establishment of PRC.
I know, and let me actually ask you there, because many Chinese friends of mine, more recent friends from mainland, I would say all of the groups that don't like Xi Jinping very much, claim that the guy has this grandiose, insane plan of remaining until 2049 to be seen as the true heir of Mao and the Mao #2 and the true co-founder of the PRC. Does that kind of rumor or speculation or view circulates also among people you talk to?
Yes, that's roughly true. But with
I hope he has a good health to start with.
With one footnote. Again, 2049 was quoted mainly because of the remark I mentioned, which was actually 1992 consensus between Taiwan and China. So Xi Jinping want to achieve three main targets. Number one is reunification, and the target date was previously set 2049. Okay, when Deng Xiaoping kind of stepped down and Jiang Zemin took over. Okay, so this is kind of commonly agreed. So that was the first target. The other two targets, you know, I don't want to bore the group, you know, because it's not totally related. But one is to reach some kind of status of richness. Okay, kind of middle high income country. Okay, not just middle income, but middle high income. And then the third one is more related to the international power. So this is something he wants to achieve. So I don't know whether he can live that long, but this actually protect him from being forced to step down. But at the same time, when the voice become too strong from the military side, he can still be forced because the rule can change.
Sure, the rule has changed many times, so at least twice in recent 40, 50 years. So, all right, so that's your reading of this. So let me try to understand. You said, well, the economy of Taiwan, blah, 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 small, we're all agreeing, you know, a war. On the other hand, the economic system of Taiwan is deeply integrated in the economic system of China. Many of the capitalists of mainland China are actually living in Taiwan, of Taiwanese origin, go back and forth, in some sense, double identities. I learned this, as you know, very well, long ago, visiting Taiwan back in the 90s. So what do these people want? I'm sure they don't call the shots, but they call some of the shots. And,
yes.
and no matter how much we'll get, that's the next question, Xi Jinping may be out there to get the big bad guys and bad in his view, and restoring the power of the party on banks and so on. I don't think he's so stupid to destroy all or attack all of the chicken that have been laying a lot of golden eggs during the last 40 years. And so let's call them the medium big industrialists, those worth $1 billion or less,
yeah.
which are very many.
Okay.
Well, how do they see the situation? Obviously, in some sense, those are those that are going to lose more from military conflict, and for sure perceive better than anybody else the dramatic risk for both sides.
Right. So let me make a couple of quick remarks first before addressing the question. Okay. So the first remark is Taiwan, China are closely connected economically. Okay. But it's very asymmetric. So China is Taiwan's #1 largest trade partner. US is the second one. Okay. But Taiwan is also China's #10 trade partner, import plus export together, which is large, right? Because Taiwan is small, so still #10 partner, which is large. So, so in terms of trade, it is very symmetric. Now, how about in terms of FDI? China's FDI is beyond #20 inflow into Taiwan, but Taiwan's FDI used to be #2, but now still #10 into China. So Taiwan still play a very important role. And the #3, people work, mainland Chinese working in Taiwan and the Taiwanese working in China. So Taiwan has, roughly speaking, about 2 million people affiliated with China. Constantly working there is more like 1 million-ish, 1.2 million-ish. But like there are many people flying back and forth, frequent flyers. Okay, but China also has quite a few, like somewhere between 0.5 and 0.6 million people, mainland Chinese in Taiwan. But they are all low-level type, not businessmen, like cleaning lady, maid, long-term health care workers, and some low-level workers. So Taiwanese in mainland China, they are like scientists and the businessmen, but China are more like a low-level servicemen and some low-level manufacturer people. Okay, so it is asymmetric. So mainland Chinese in Taiwan cannot influence Taiwan at all. But Taiwanese in mainland China will have some leverage to influence mainland China. And exactly because of this, I want to revise down the military actions. But then I'm moving forward. If you ask people, I'm going to divide people in three groups. Political group is one, businessman is second, and all the rest. Okay. Business people, nobody want to have war, period, from either side. Political people, mainland Chinese may want to have a war. Taiwanese will claim mainland Chinese want to have a war to win election, but they wouldn't dare to want to have a war. And how about the general public? Well, the general public is a large body. So from the media, it looks wrong, mainly because if you speak out, you may be interviewed. If you are well connected through social media, then people pay attention to you. But those people are not the general popular view, actually. Okay, those people may cook out a lot of things. The general body of people, if you ask them, in Taiwan, they don't want to have a war. In mainland China, they don't care really as much. So that's my answer to your question.
I'm moving my head because I wanted a sharper answer. Let's try to see if we get deeper into this, the role of the elite classes on both sides by looking at the current actions that everybody talks about of Xi Jinping controlling, attacking, or the government of mainland China, how can I say, getting seriously involved in the economic sector, in parts for facing announced disaster like Grande, or the whole real estate thing. I noticed there is a second big developer now that is in, essentially in default. And in part to reassert, I remember debating this also with you, but many friends in China before COVID, to reassert their power on the banks and the financial sector, which explains why the banks have never been privatized de facto. How do you see this? Is this, yeah, let me give you my two hypotheses. One is the current regime really thinks that China's done what it needed to do to catch up. The middle income trap is not a problem, and therefore we can do without the Westerners, we can do without interaction with the West. We can reaffirm an old view of being the country at the center of the world. And if we're not yet at the center of the world because there are the Americans and the European, we might be at the center of Asia and be self-sufficient. That's one view. I would say the most negative, because if that was really the view, then we would see troubles for years to come. The other is Xi Jinping has realized that income inequality has grown too much. This is provoking tension in the country, such as those in Hong Kong, and also within the party. That makes his ruling and his power unstable. And on top of that, these very large tycoons or billionaires have become so large compared to the country even, or his political power, that they might be challenges to him himself. And therefore, two birds with one stone, I'll get rid of possible competitors in the popularity game, and I also make my party happy because I beat up on the richest one. Which one of the two versions is the correct one? And I'd say the second can be seen as more tactical, and whereas the first is more like a long-run decision.
Okay, so the second one is more correct with some, I would say, some kind of adjustment. Okay, the first one is to some degree initially correct, in a sense. Xi Jinping made a bad move in the sense of one country, one belt, one road, one belt. Indeed, one road, one belt is also connected to Italy, and which actually sent many Chinese investors to Italy in the millennial era, for example. So at that time, Xi Jinping want to use one belt, one road as an instrument to create the international power, but the assessment was wrong. The assessment was wrong because he ignored the potential change of the political power in the US. Okay, so once Trump becomes the leader, Trump cannot take this kind of power unlimitedly. Okay, so this is why initially Trump claimed to be a good friend of Xi Jinping, but later they turned out to be the worst enemies. Okay, so the assessment was wrong at the very beginning, but this was true actually. So your first view was right at the very at the beginning basically, but China has given up that very quickly, knowing that may actually. So once you made enemy with the US, you have to keep Europe as your friend. So China become very soft in many dimensions. Okay, to try to be sure, they are not going to have this kind of China is great. China has done with poverty already. Okay, now turning to your second second view, which is more true in a sense because of the experiment. So China used Macau and Hong Kong as the experiments of one country, two systems, giving Macau essentially no flexibility, but giving Hong Kong all the flexibility, not all the, but almost all the flexibility they want. But with the umbrella and with the most recent, so-called, all the movements, then they realize, this may not work because this may actually challenge the political leaders. Okay, so this is why they have tightened dramatically, both on the political side and also on the economic side, not just in Hong Kong, but also in China. And all the Alibaba issues, Evergrande. So all those issues were kind of connected to this kind of defeating the major threat type idea. Okay, now by defeating the major threat, they are taking a drawback on the economic side. Once they take a drawback,
let's try to understand what do you have in mind as major threat.
The major threat are twofold. Number one, they only care about softwares. They don't care about manufacturers.
Sure.
But through softwares, they figure if they cannot really fully control, then they will lose the power because of social networks.
Because of, excuse me, Ping, social.
Because of social networks, then the words will get out too quickly. If they cannot force all those software type groups to be quote unquote disciplined by their standard, right? Our discipline is freedom, right? But by their standard, then things may get out of control very quickly. They have never hit anybody like pure manufacturers. Indeed, they actually try to protect Huawei.
Like Huawei seemed to have been heavily beaten by the Western initiative.
Yes,
that's impression.
Yes.
So
so that's the main triggers. So the trigger, I really think, by understanding both sides, Taiwan side and the mainland side, the trigger is not from either side, but the trigger is from mainly the US.
Right.
Europe is
but there is a part of this that has a lot to do with well, under the label of national security of both China and US, and therefore also Europe, we are playing a game that is not obvious how much it has to do with national security. I'm no expert to judge, so I'm just casting a doubt because my little understanding says, well, there are national security issues here. Let me put myself also in the screen together with you. But they don't seem to be as dramatic as these people are making it. And what we're doing is, in fact, playing competition games for some large conglomerates that wants to win a game that is completely a profit making.
Exactly. I agree with you 100%, and there was nothing to add. So, but this kind of competition game between China and the US will very naturally use Taiwan as a kind of strategic movement, right? So Taiwan, in a sense, become a chip. So US and China are gambling, using Taiwan as chips. So Taiwan become their main bargaining chip. And now, when this become the case, now I have to go back to the military actions people are talking about a lot right now, including Times, including New York Times, CNN, and BBS, right? But they are mostly wrong in one very important aspect. So Taiwan, Korea, I mean South Korea, Japan and China, they all have the so-called air defense identification zone. Okay, so ADIZ. Okay, so let me just call ADIZ. Okay, this ADIZ is overlapping between China and South Korea, China and Japan in the East China Sea area, and overlapping with Taiwan in the west Taiwan Strait. All the military actions, we are talking about 50 flights per day sometime, they are all in the overlapping zone. Because it is overlapping zone and there's no legality issues there, because airspace is international treaty. Okay, ADIZ is not. So Taiwan could argue, oh, you have invaded me. China say, hey, I'm just doing my own business. Of course, they are showing off, but legally, there's nothing. There's nothing, countering the international law or treaty. Okay. So, but what could happen? What could happen is, if the Green Party win the election again in 2024, China will become madder for sure.
China will
become madder, more,
so
more mad.
Because of the previous argument, you think that the victory of the Green Party would escalate the verbal game, and they would perceive that there is an offense. For those listening to us, being offended, even symbolically, does matter in the Orient.
Yes.
Or at least in the Chinese culture, quite a bit more than, say, it may matter in the French or Italian thing.
Yes, and in that case, we may see more serious military actions, possibly cross the airspace border. I'm not talking about ADIZ anymore. And that may trigger a war. Okay, so usually, how can you avoid this kind of triggering, war triggers? In the U.S., as far as I know, between Pentagon and the China Middle South Sea, in China the power is in the Middle South Sea in Beijing. Okay, so between the two sides, there's always a clause, both agree, which is, if you see a military action there, call this number first to verify whether it is unintentional. This is very important. This is very important. Even under Trump, and of course now, there are always this kind of mechanism. Okay, between China and India, the same thing, because there are some tension there. Between China and Japan, also the same agreement. In Taiwan, used to have this agreement, but since the Green Party won in 2016, there were no such phone number or whatever fax, whatever you want to use it, okay, or telex, whatever. There's no such mechanism anymore. This is why I say in 2020, after 2024, if the Green Party win, and afterwards, in particular the first year, it is very possible there may be a trigger because of the lack of this mechanism. And once war initiated, there may be... Aren't you
being a bit too dramatic here? So what's what it's in neither side interest not to re-establish some form of communication?
Okay. China want to maintain the same communication. So, okay. So let me go back to two historical thing there. The first historical thing is, going back, to 1992. So in 1992, slightly before 1992, Taiwan established a high-level commission. Okay, so the chief is called commissioner, basically. Okay, and mainland China also established similar one. Okay, Taiwan is mainly called that's one like Cross Taiwan Street commission. Okay, in China, China is has a similar name there basically. Okay, it is basically called Taiwan Affair Commission basically. So the two numbers are the two commissions are communicating all the time. As little as like one person, one Taiwanese violate, like the traffic, okay? But because one person got hit, should we arrest them or should we send back to Taiwan?
Which I suppose must be also why all these continuous violations of the Taiwan airspace never leads to. So this is a bit funny. I mean, that's a part of the Chinese culture. I don't. So there is, oh look, I'm gonna violate you today, and I'm gonna make sure you look fool. But please don't shoot them down, because it's not meant to be real. Yeah. You're describing a bit of a funny situation.
Yes, it is. But this is kind of very Chinese. This is very Chinese. So Chinese are compromising sometimes in a very strange way. Okay, so they can make mental mistakes suddenly, but then they compromise quickly after the mental mistake. Okay, so this is the mechanism I was talking about. Okay, but then there's 1999. Okay. So in 1996, when Li Denghui, kind of pro-independence guy, when he was in election with KMT, China shoot missiles to the Taiwan Strait. Without any harm. They are just missiles without any serious triggers, basically. Okay. So of course, the piece of missile hit a person, the person may be injured, but there's no exploration. But then afterwards, initially it was 50-50% between KMT and the Li Denghui. Okay, but because of the missile shooting, Li Denghui won. So they learned the lesson basically somehow. They know this kind of threat may not work under Jiang Zemin. So Jiang Zemin learned a lesson. So in 1999, Li Denghui announced two special country-to-country relations between Taiwan and China. Although Li Denghui add special country, it's not like country, not like two countries, but still this is kind of cross the border. Okay, so China.
There's a lot of face-saving game here. This is something, so people like to say, European tend to have this view, right, that China and Japan are so different, and instead, I think they better study those countries a bit more carefully. This is something which is very large part of the Asian culture I've learned, where face-saving, yes, either side is yes, quite important. It's yes, crucial.
Very crucial.
To your public reputation, to your status, and you get to the point of doing real things in order to save symbolic things, so to speak.
Yes, exactly. But in 1999, the war is almost like any time could happen, because they have put something like 150% more of missiles initially facing, Japan and some other places, now facing Taiwan. Okay, 150%, which means like the total number become 2.5, right? Okay, so this is very serious, right? But still, before doing that, they actually called the US, okay, and asked US to be the middleman. to talk to Taiwan, which the US did. And I think it's Bill Clinton, right? I couldn't quite remember, 1999, I think it's Bill Clinton, yeah. So Bill Clinton made Li Denghui to admit still one China. And the two spatial countries just like the ownership of the piece of land. And then everything was settled. Now when the US and the China relationship becomes sour, US cannot be middleman anymore. Which country can play this when the mechanism between Taiwan and the China was broken, has been broken since 2016. Who can play the military? Who can play the middleman role? That's become crucial. So, if you ask me what is the best way to solve the problem when each side want to save their face, they don't want to have this mechanism to be connected again, I say the only way is probably Big Joe Biden. He has to agree to go back to serve as this middleman, and I can compromise on something ABC.
Well, here you're being a bit too optimistic, maybe with your democratic soul. The current policy that the US has taken doesn't seem to be really heading in proposing themselves as middlemen, right?
Yes, you are quite correct.
The Green Party and the Red Party. So it's interesting. We have the Green Party, the Blue Party, and the Red Party. Colorful China. Let me ask you one thing in closing, Ping. You don't have to answer it necessarily. We'll talk more when I get back, but living the last 2 months here in Europe, trying to explain that the China risk is very different from what the Russian risk or the USSR risk was 40 or 50 or 60 years ago has become increasingly difficult in the West. And particularly explaining that yes, it's not true that there is no risk, there is a risk, but it's a different risk and it needs to be handled differently. And the main obstacle is, let me be brutal, so you have, I'll let you have 5 minutes to, well, you know me, so I tend to say it. For those that listen to it, Ping and I have known each other for almost 40 years, so he knows how I work. So the view is the Chinese are liars, the Chinese wants to take over, and they're not, you can't trust them, they will never accept a situation of fair competition, partnership, etc., until they rule. It's not part of their culture. So that's the popular way of justifying them, the meanings. What's your view when people say that?
I cannot disagree in a sense, but let me just add a couple of things. I don't know European politics, okay, but I know quite well China, Taiwan, US, and to some degree Japan and South Korea. I would say easily 3/4 of politicians are liars, if this is not too conservative. They are liars in the sense they cover up what they have said. They're in the back of their mind, they may want to do ABC, but in order to secure the election outcome or to secure the face to the military hardliners, they will say XYZ instead. So in this sense, I call them liars. They are not genuine. They are not honest, basically. Okay, so they can act in many different ways, but they are not honest. And hence, reading from what they say is difficult. But there's always an under the table mechanism which will save everybody. Save everybody from repeating what had happened, what had happened in World War I. Unintentional war to begin with. So, so with under table stuff, this is the only reason I'm more optimistic. So you can see Trump and Xi Jinping fight. You can see Biden says, I will not remove whatever the tariff stuff Trump has already placed. But under the table, when they speak to each other, I doubt this is the case. There must be some agreement, some compromise. Okay, so because of this, we can blame, it's really hard to evaluate the China risk. The main reason is very simple. It's not because of whether people are liars, because most of the politicians are liars, in my view. But what is different in China is different from Western societies is they don't have the people to balance. They don't have the full democracy. And hence it makes everything different. Okay, but the risk is not just from China's side, it's everywhere because of populism. Now political game becomes more and more toward populism. So election could be very tricky. Think about the German election. Think about the previous election of Trump. So populism becomes so common everywhere. So even with democracy, the risk is not zero anymore. The risk is not nearly zero anymore. Because people may act crazily in order to win.
So it's going to be all the academics like you and me trying to keep the communication open and the link evolve. It has done good for the last 40 years. So
yes,
it looks like it's going to be a bit more complicated in the future, no?
Yes, I think much more complicated.
All right, so before closing, do you mind to tell us, to the people listening to us, what the picture on your back is representing?
The picture represents Suzhou in China, which is a beautiful ancient city near Shanghai. Okay, so this canal was the so-called Grand Canal, part of the Grand Canal, basically. So that was built a long time ago. So I took a picture early in the morning before the tourists arrive.
And when he says early in the morning, knowing his habits, it might be truly early in the morning.
Yes, this was like, I remember I woke up probably around 5-something-ish, and then I tried to walk to the canal before I go to the buffet breakfast. So this must be like maybe around 6, I think.
All right, Ping, thanks a lot.
Grazie.
Pleasure talking to you, and I'll see you in about a couple of weeks.
Sure, sounds good.
Thank you, my friend.
Sure, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.